Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
We still have a few days left, but July is on track to become the hottest month the world has ever seen. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. California's power grid is starting to show a little stress during this persistent hot spell. As KPBS environment reporter Eric Anderson tells us, grid managers issued 2 warnings that the gap between power supply and demand is getting tighter.
The California Independent System Operator says there's not a lot of wiggle room when forecasting current electricity supply and demand numbers. Call it an early warning that an extended hot spell is taking a toll. The hot weather hasn't reached last year's levels, which spawned 10 consecutive flex alerts. Those alerts are pleas for the public to conserve energy.
And typically for us to really run into issues, it has to be hot not only in the interior part of California, but in the big cities, in Southern California and the Bay Area. It's been warm, but not super hot there.
The state also got a boost on the power supply side this year. California added new gas and renewable generating capacity, more battery storage, and has access to more hydropower. That's thanks to a wet winter. But power officials are concerned about heat, wind, and wildfires happening at the same time.
So it's really the combination of everything happening simultaneously that we worry the most about and that we have to pay the most attention to.
Climate researchers say heat waves will be more intense and last longer as the planet warms. People continue putting a lot of climate-altering emissions in the air, and that locks in a warming cycle.
One of the tyrannies of greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere is that CO2, for example, is very long-lived, and what has been deposited there so far is going to be a problem that resides in the atmosphere for decades.
Federal officials say July will likely be the hottest month on record globally. Ocean and air temperatures are widely expected to continue climbing, and that will stress an electricity grid already facing challenges. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
We've been locked into a really hot weather pattern across the interior Southwest. Meanwhile, life is a lot easier when it comes to avoiding the heat for the coastal areas. So as we look at tonight's forecast, we're looking at the lows dropping down into the mid-60s. Low clouds are going to be lurking offshore. Inland areas, Borrego Springs stays hot with a low of 81. There are some big changes coming, though. Look at this. Monsoon moisture begins to become a little more robust into the weekend. We could see a spotty storm later this weekend, cooler as well. Details ahead.
Today, President Biden announced new measures to address the life-threatening heat across the country. $152 million will fund expanded water storage and ramp up climate resilience in California, Colorado, and Washington state. Another $7 million will go to improve weather forecasting. He's also asking the Department of Labor to issue a hazard alert to help protect workers against the extreme heat. The president was joined by the mayors of San Antonio and Phoenix, where 25 people have died.
Oh my God, this is hell on earth, I guess. It's just that hot. And this is probably the worst July we ever had.
And meanwhile, the heat index is forecast to reach over 100 degrees in the Northeast, causing PJM, the nation's largest power grid, to declare an emergency alert. The company supplies power to over 65 million people. A decades-old law governing rent control in California could change in a big way. A petition to give cities and counties much more control over the cost of rent has qualified for next November's ballot. KPBS reporter John Carroll tells us why supporters say it's needed and why landlords say it's a terrible idea.
Hello, everyone.
This is the third time supporters of rent control have tried to get a measure passed that would give cities and counties the power to establish it. The announcement last night from California Secretary of State Shirley Weber that the initiative had qualified for the November 2024 ballot was met with joy on a statewide Zoom call today.
Over 601,000 valid signatures were submitted, and today the Secretary of State is certifying us for the November 2024 ballot.
One by one, housing advocates, elected officials, and former elected officials held forth on why they say the ballot initiative is so important. Among them, longtime activist Dolores Huerta.
They hit the voters, hit the streets, make sure that everybody votes to make sure this initiative passes.
There is state law that governs annual rent increases. They're now limited to 5% plus the local consumer price index, or a maximum of 10%. Next month, that limit will decrease to 8%. But it's a 1995 law that rent control advocates say is doing damage. It prevents cities and counties from limiting initial rental rates, and it prevents the limiting of rent increases for existing tenants in residential properties first occupied after February of 1995, as well as single-family homes and condos. The Justice for Renters Act would do away with that law.
We need to be able to let people age in place, to let people raise their kids in the cities and towns that they come from. And I'm very excited to campaign and vote and get my friends to understand why this measure is so important at the statewide level.
People who sign that, I don't know that they fully understand the impact.
Jeff Fowler is the president of the Apartment Owners Association of California. He says if the Justice for Renters Act passes, it will actually make things worse.
Because it's not creating more housing, it actually creates a shortage. And so the less of something you have, the more expensive it becomes. And so it's not helping them in any way.
Fowler says a better approach is to have government subsidize rent for people who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford it. Fowler says pro-rent control groups will spend a ton of money to make sure the measure passes. Rent control advocates say the same thing about landlords, so expect to see lots of commercials on this in the coming months. One thing is for sure, the decision on the third statewide attempt to pass rent control will be up to the voters in November of next year. John Carroll, KPBS News.
After receiving an upgrade in June of 2022, the amphibious assault ship Boxer went to sea for 1 week and hasn't left San Diego since. KPBS military reporter Andrew Dyer has more.
Since May 2020, the amphibious assault ship Boxer has been a mainstay on the San Diego waterfront. In June of that year, it entered a San Diego dry dock, and for the next 2 years underwent $200 million in repairs and upgrades to operate Marine Corps F-35s, the latest generation of fighter aircraft. When upgrades were finished in June of last year, the Boxer went to sea for 1 week. The 30-year-old ship returned to San Diego on June 28, 2022, and it hasn't left since.
We don't discuss specific instances of maintenance casualties due to operational security.
Commander Arlo Abramson is a Naval Surface Force spokesperson in San Diego. He wouldn't say specifically what problems plagued the Boxer over the last year or how many times the ship tried and failed to get underway. But, he says, sailors have stayed sharp by simulating being at sea. Amphibious assault ships function as mini aircraft carriers, deploying with helicopters, vertical short takeoff and landing jets, and marine expeditionary troops. Abramson says the ship is expected to return to sea soon, but will not say when.
I want to emphasize that we do expect Boxer to execute its sea trial phase in the near future as part of the ship's workup cycle for deployment.
The Boxer last deployed in 2019. Andrew Dyer, KPBS News.
A National City teacher already charged with engaging in sex acts with a former student is facing new charges involving a second victim. 34-year-old Jacqueline Ma, who taught at Lincoln Acres Elementary School, was arrested earlier this year. An amended complaint filed this week lists new charges of lewd act upon a child involving a second boy under the age of 14. Defense attorney Eve Maestre says the fact that Ma was a teacher is going to play a big role in the case.
She was in a position of trust and of power. And so, it's going to go towards what they call grooming, okay? Her ability to groom these children, make them trust her, have confidences with her that is going to let her really manipulate them into doing these things.
Prosecutors have not commented on whether the second victim was also a former student. Ma, who was named one of San Diego County's top educators last year, remains in custody without bail, and she faces over 150 years to life in prison if convicted on all charges. The Federal Reserve is once again raising interest rates to their highest level in more than 2 decades. Jen Sullivan has a closer look at what this means for your wallet.
1 month after a pause, the Federal Reserve is raising interest rates once again to the highest level in more than 20 years.
We took another step by raising our policy interest rate a 1/4 percentage point. We've covered a lot of ground, and the full effects of our tightening have yet to be felt.
On Wednesday, Fed Chairman Jerome Powell announcing its 11th rate hike since last spring. That's despite data showing the economy is holding up and inflation is softening. The latest consumer price index shows prices are cooling down. In June, that index rose only 3%, a much slower pace than the high of 9% the same month last year, which was a 40-year high.
Consumers are hanging tough. Part of that goes to the job market. Unemployment is very low, 3.6%. You've got to go back, 50, 60 years to see an unemployment rate consistently this low.
So what does this mean for you? Economists say the biggest impact will be on borrowers because the Fed's benchmark lending rate impacts car loans, credit cards, and mortgages. For people looking for a home loan, this latest round of interest hikes means they'll pay more for their property. The historic series of interest rates have sidelined many would-be homebuyers, and there's no guarantee relief is coming anytime soon. Economists say more rate hikes could be ahead this year.
Inflation is still too high. The Federal Reserve is raising interest rates aggressively to slow the economy and get that inflation back down.
For Consumer Watch, I'm Jen Sullivan.
I'm William Brangham. Tonight on the NewsHour, how extreme heat is disproportionately affecting low-income workers and people of color. Coming up at 7, right after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Quite a day for a couple of San Diego Waves at the World Cup. Australia's Emily Van Egmond scored a goal against Nigeria. Also, the Wave announced a new contract for goalkeeper Kaylin Sheridan that will keep her in San Diego through 2026. She's playing for Canada's national team. Both Australia and Canada will play each other on Monday, and the winner likely advancing to the elimination round of 16. Start time is 3 a.m. Pacific. The U.S. women's national soccer team fought back to a draw with the Netherlands in their latest round at the World Cup in New Zealand, but what's been happening off the pitch has also captured the world's attention. Karen Kaifa has a look at the trail the team is blazing for others around the world.
An estimated 1 billion plus viewers, but millions of dollars behind their men's soccer counterparts. On average, the women athletes at the 2023 World Cup earned just 25 cents for every dollar earned by men at their World Cup last year, according to a CNN analysis. In recent years, the U.S. women's national team waged a high-profile pay battle. 1999 World Cup champion Brianna Scurry says that was even with the U.S. women putting up championship-caliber play for decades.
Well, I think it really put women's soccer on the map, and we became the girls next door. And a lot of people started looking at us and saying, hey, this is interesting. This game was exciting. It was intriguing.
The U.S. women's national team reached an equal pay deal with U.S. Soccer in May 2022 after 6 years of legal wrangling, including a gender discrimination lawsuit filed in 2019. Team star Alex Morgan said this week the equal pay discussion in soccer isn't only about the U.S. women's team anymore.
The conversations that have been brought up, the questions that media are asking about equal pay, that was not something that was going around with all teams. It was really a focus on us.
Women's teams in Jamaica, Canada, and Spain have waged fights for equal treatment and pay. And last October, more than 150 players from 25 national teams, backed by their global union, sent a letter to soccer's world governing body calling for equal prize money and conditions at the Women's World Cup. FIFA has said it's aiming for equality in payments by the next World Cups in 2026 and 2027. In Washington, I'm Karen Kaifa.
More than 1,000 San Diego Unified students from across the county are spending their summer learning on Olympic-inspired soccer fields. KPBS education reporter MG Perez shows us how the game is providing lessons in leadership.
Kick, pass, or get out of the way. These players are serious about their soccer.
A lot of passion, a lot of time. You got to put in the work. It takes a lot.
12-year-old Isaac Vargas plays goalie or any other position his team needs filled. For 2 months, he is committed to weekly summer camps here at the Chula Vista Olympic Training Center.
Get it!
These players come from elementary and middle school campuses across San Diego Unified, which has partnered with the Chicano Federation and the San Diego Foundation to provide skills and life lessons, preventing learning loss and teaching problem solving, decision making, team building, and helping with mental health too.
We see it on a day-to-day. Youth start off being really shy. Sometimes they don't know anybody else that's in the camp, but very quickly they make friends, they develop self-confidence, and that's what it's all about.
The camp runs all day, and it's free to children who have applied to be here from neighborhoods that are under-resourced and often underserved. $500,000 from the district's summer enrichment budget makes the practice and the potential for progress possible.
We need individuals to bring their full selves, to be a part of a team, a part of the collective, and we need the collective to see the individuals and their full potential.
Along with all they are learning here, students are also getting ready for college, believe it or not. Once they're finished with the camp, they will each receive 4 units of college credit. The credit for leadership training is redeemable anytime in the future at UC San Diego, one of the camp's other sponsors. 11-year-old Lola Banta is well on her way to reaching her goals off and on the field.
It feels awesome because you felt that you did a goal that you wanted to do, and you also scored one for your team so you guys could win.
Those are important points for anyone keeping score. MG Perez, KPBS News.
As August creeps up, it's time to start thinking about heading back to school. Health experts say preparing now can help lessen the stress of a new school year. Mandy Gaither has more on how experts say you can handle the summer to school transition.
As summer starts winding down, back to school mode gears up.
Kids are just like adults. They need preparation.
Strong for Life licensed therapist Jody Baumstein says to start now by gauging how children are feeling about the new school year, ask open-ended questions, and listen.
If we say something like, oh, are you nervous to go back to school? Maybe they are, maybe they aren't, but now they might be overthinking what they actually feel or feeling like they need to respond in a certain way.
No matter what kids share, Baumstein says to validate and normalize their feelings, especially in times of change. She says getting back on track with habits and routines can help ease stress. For example, if bedtimes have gotten later over the summer, Baumstein says to inch the time back gradually.
If we set ourselves up from the beginning with something that's totally unrealistic, the kids aren't going to be really tired at that time. They might feel frustrated. You might feel frustrated.
And as everyone settles back into the school routine, Baumstein says to limit any unnecessary stressors.
Maybe you're redoing a room or starting to potty train a younger child. Maybe it can wait a week or two as we enter into the school year. It's really helpful to think about pressing pause on those things.
For Health Minute, I'm Mandy Gaither.
Therapists say getting back into the habit of things like a consistent mealtime can bring security and comfort to children because she says their brains will know what to expect.
It's been a hot time across the Southwest, and if you're right along the coastline, you're in better shape than the rest inland. Still steamy, very hot away from the coast in the eastern part of the region. There will be gradual relief, though. Good news for everybody. From west to east, we're going to find some gradual relief as we step deeper into this coming weekend. And actually, monsoon moisture will begin to creep west, from east to west, from Arizona into far southeast California. So we have a few players on the field here, but in the meantime, it's still hot. Heat advisories from Temecula to Escondido into Julian and Pine Valley. You step east into the deserts, it's hot, very hot out there. Excessive heat warnings do continue. Tonight, 68 for your low, and there will be some low clouds, patchy fog out there near the coast. And tomorrow, here we are, 111 in Borrego Springs, up on top of Mount Laguna, 77. That looks pretty good. And as we deal with some pretty significant heat, El Cajon, 90 degrees, 92 into Escondido, but along the coastline, 77s. This is partly why San Diego is a popular place to live. The coast is our friend, and that water keeps us a little bit more moderated. Now, we're going to notice some clouds, low clouds lurking in the early mornings and late at night. But look at this, Saturday afternoon. Couple of spotty thunderstorms beginning to sneak in to view. They're not going to be widespread. They're very unlikely to impact us in the city, but daily spotty storms become a little bit more expansive, and perhaps that record-long streak of now more than 28 days in a row of 110 degrees each afternoon in Phoenix continuously, at least consecutive days, that might end soon with this extra moisture in the neighborhood for our friends in Phoenix. Now, for us along the coastline, still very warm, low 80s over the next few days, backing off by a couple degrees into Monday, a little bit more humidity around. Low 90s Saturday and Sunday, some cooling for the inland areas into Monday. For the mountains, we drop into the mid-60s, heavy thunderstorms possible, some risk of flash flooding. Be safe if you're going to be hiking. Early is best. The chance of lightning really increases. The deserts, 112 on Saturday, but all the way down to 102 by Monday. That'll be a popular change. I'm meteorologist Jeff Cornish for KPBS News.
Surfing and San Diego would seem to go hand in hand, but not for everyone. For some children, trips to the beach are rare. KPBS reporter Kitty Alvarado takes us to a summer camp giving kids a chance to ride the waves.
In my dreams, the ocean's like just a magical place.
Have you ever thought about how the ocean makes you feel? Jamison Wynn has. He loves it so much, he sees it in his dreams.
That the ocean feels like just like a rain of magic coming over you and making you feel great inside.
His younger brother Cole says the ocean makes him feel at peace.
The sun's always out and it's really like it takes away all your problems.
They live in Julian on the outskirts of San Diego County, so visits to the beach are few and far between.
We live far away from the ocean and we don't get to see it a lot.
And that's where Camp Surf comes in.
So we're awesome to start our first surf carnival of the summer. Are you all stoked?
This summer, they and dozens of other children got to spend a week at this magical place on Imperial Beach. Since 1969, this YMCA overnight camp has been making dreams come true for children all over the world. This year alone, nearly 900 children will get the Camp Surf experience.
We're really focusing on positive youth development.
While surfing is just one activity they learn at Camp Surf, Kapili Pasa, the camp's waterfront manager, says it's the key that unlocks happiness.
We use surfing as a really big tool to be able to get them to trust in themselves, trust in each other, and then just get to experience the beautiful ocean.
But unfortunately, Camp Surf is a place most children will only see in their dreams.
Coming to the beach and dreaming about it just makes me feel a lot more calm and happy.
Jackson Rosas from Escondido says he's in the same boat as the Wynn brothers.
I don't see the ocean that often. I don't surf that often.
And he thinks of the beach a lot too.
Imagine that you're sitting on the beach, watching the waves.
He also says people make assumptions about kids like them just because they live in California.
People think that I go to the beach a lot.
But Naveen Alaves, who helps run the YMCA camp programs in Escondido, says the reality is spending a day at the beach is rare for most children who live in the county. And a whole week, well, that's just simply out of reach for most families, especially families like theirs that live on the county's margins.
If it weren't for this week of camp, a lot of these kids would stay at home. Some of our older siblings taking care of, younger siblings. Parents are working.
A reality she knows all too well.
I myself didn't grow up going to the beach. Even though I grew up in Encinitas, I lived probably like 10 minutes from the beach. It wasn't something that my parents had access to.
But this year, she and her fellow YMCA Escondido Impact ambassadors raised $25,000 to change that for 50 Escondido students.
I want to give a voice to those students, to those families.
Among them, Jackson.
I got to surf, boogie board, and
meet new friends.
Jackson says Camp Surf changed him for the better.
I feel like I kind of am a new person because I was meeting new people, doing new things, and going out of my comfort zone.
And the Wynn brothers, they feel different too. Maybe it's the surf legs they grew in just a week.
This experience at the YMCA has made this life a lot better and made me dream bigger about things.
After harnessing the power of the ocean, they feel like nothing is impossible.
It made me dream bigger of being a pro surfer and learning stuff that I didn't know that a 9-year-old could do.
But like all good things, their Camp Surf came to an end. But they will always carry a little piece of Camp Surf with them, and they can always visit in their dreams. Kitty Alvarado, KPBS News.
And here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. In the past decade, the homeless population in Texas has dropped by 28%, while in California, it's grown by 43%. NPR's Morning Edition examines the possibilities and limits to what California can learn from Texas's approach. And KPBS Roundtable is discussing San Diego's homeless encampment ban that takes effect this weekend. And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Good night.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.